one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
Hot Soldier's existence has always been a bit of an enigma. It was clear from the get-go that they were at least somewhat affiliated with Mech Fans Toys, but we never really knew to what extent. There were stirrings of companies linking up, and they were definitely the same scale. But at some point, Mech Fans Toys realized they didn't need Hot Soldiers, and they just started doing things on their own. But for a time, if you wanted original yet cheap designs, they were the way to go. Mech Fans Toys were still only doing KOs at the time, so you couldn't really count on that. But for the cheap and cheerful stuff, and for the stuff that was designed to be cheap and cheerful without skimping on the budget, Hot Soldiers were the ones to go with. And out of their admittedly small lineup, I believe no release is as important as their Soundwave. Although I don't have Soundwave, I just got Soundblaster because I was getting the DX9 version at the time. So yeah, we're discussing Soundblaster. Same difference, similar cassettes, you get the deal. Okay, so first impressions on this guy are pretty damn good. I was initially skeptical going into this design because it is a fairly cheap release. Hot Soldier's Soundwave and Soundblaster retailed for about 30 bucks each back in the day. And back then, that sort of value for money was crazy. That's like 10 bucks more than an average Legends class figure, and even these days, it's 10 bucks more than an average core class figure. So releasing something at that price, well, I was a bit skeptical. How would it turn out? Especially since back then Mech Fans Toys was just starting to kick into gear and they were only doing knockoffs, and pretty bad ones at that. They've only just improved recently with their releases, so you can kind of tell why I was a little bit hesitant with this. But Hot Soldiers, they did a pretty damn good job. Now, they have made some sacrifices. They haven't used any faux parts for anything, so you've got the robot waist over here and you've just got the thigh sitting there, so it's a bit of a weirdly proportioned boombox. You can see it's a much chunkier affair than what we're used to these days, but I still think it works pretty well. It's got compromises, sure, no doubt, but for what it does it really well. And the paintwork is surprisingly good. You got a lot of silver here, gold paints all over the place. Yes, I've kind of up the con symbol, so that's my fault there. And they have molded in the arrow there, but they haven't done it the best. But they have painted even the inside of that all silver. That's fantastic. They've really done a brilliant job here. And of course, it cleans up well at the back here too. Of course, that's not really saying much. It's just a box. Engineering Soundwaves isn't that hard these days, but it's still pretty good. My only real gripe with this mode is that you need the guns to keep him all lined up there. It's not something I like. I like it when the arms go all the way down and do things properly. Like you bring in the recent Core Class Soundwave, and yes, I have upgraded him. He no longer has the movie masterpiece Bumblebee Prime cat ears on show. They've been fixed up with the Tim Hader feet upgrades. But one thing I really liked about Core Class Soundwave was that the arms kept everything nice and sturdy, whereas with the Hot Soldiers Soundblaster, you need the guns to do that. That is my only real gripe here. Everything else works really well. You've even got the cool unnecessary shit, like a sort of on-off slider over there and the volume slider over there. They've molded in speakers there, even though it's not really the same as a bunch of others. They've got the record button over there. They've got all the buttons here. They've just done a brilliant job. Even the eject button's painted, even though it basically does nothing. Of course, the guns aren't the only accessories he comes with. He comes with 2 cassettes, and they all kind of slot into there. They unfortunately don't sit in the deck part there. You have to slot them fully in there, but I can bring up the sign for that. Plus, it's a pretty old figure. The fact that they're able to do that right off the bat is pretty astonishing. Of course, I think we should take a look at the 2 cassettes here before we transform the thing. He comes with Buzzsaw and Ratbat, as most Soundblasters do, and yeah, the cassette design, it's not really the best, but at this size, it's the best they could do. And I mean, the size really is tiny at 2.2 centimeters by 1.3 centimeters. Like, that is a really tiny transformer there. Transformation is dead simple. You just kind of bring out the wings and you get the head out. It's a bit difficult to get the head out. That's one criticism I guess I could give this guy, but eventually you will get it out. Come on. There we go, finally. And it's a pretty lackluster buzzsaw. I guess you gotta turn it over. No paint on the eyes. You get a bit of paint over here and plenty of black and yellow paint, so it does the job all right at the size, because it's a tiny thing. These days you would get something a bit more complicated, but for the time, it makes sense. I feel Ratbat works a bit better in cassette mode, but not as good in robot mode, I suppose bat mode. Lovely detail on one side, not as much detail on the other, but you still get plenty of silver, and they even managed to use the pins as detail as well. Just a cool little cassette, doesn't really do much, but you open it up and you bring the head forward a little bit. The head actually goes all the way down, but you don't really want to do that. Feels like they sort of retooled this out of Laserbeak and they didn't do the best job of it, but still, it works well enough. Even got little bronze highlights over there, which is a wonderful little touch. I have less to say about this because really it's just the same as Buzzsaw. It's just commendable what they were able to do at this size to begin with. They don't do a lot, but what they do well. Anywho, to size up Soundblaster, he is 7.4 centimeters wide, 3.5 centimeters long because of the big bulbous gun at the back there. And even then, he's got a lot of junk in his trunk because of the transformation. And he is 5 centimeters tall with the button there. And for ye old size comparisons, here is next to a standard Legion figure, a standard Core Class figure, a standard War for Cybertron Micromaster, and Crumbs. The transformation on this guy is basically the same as any other Soundwave, and yes, I'm keeping Buzzsaw in there because I like the aesthetic. I think it looks pretty cool. First thing you want to do is remove the weapons from the back, and we'll transform them in a little bit. You basically untab the legs from there. They're not just tabbed into the side there, they're tabbed into the arms there as well. Rotate them around and rotate the thighs around like so. The feet kind of just rotate out like that. Fortunately, they're a lot easier to get out than Buzzsaw's head. Come around to the back and bring up the fists like so. The shoulders rotate around forward. Head rotates up and towards the back and clicks in, and then you come around to the front and rotate it around 180 degrees. His shoulder cannon just plugs into his shoulder as per usual. And then this bit I'm a little bit annoyed about, but not extremely annoyed about. You unplug the gun and then you plug it back in around like that. I would have liked some sort of flip out mechanism, would have been kind of cool. But I do get it, this is a pretty cheap figure, so some sacrifices had to be made. And in robot mode, looks wise, this is actually pretty sweet. They've put a lot of detail into this thing. For starters, he is covered in mechanical detail on the shoulders, on the arms, on the legs down here. Oh my, the detail on the legs. Even bringing those classic side panels from the back there. That's awesome. Head sculpt is absolutely on point with plenty of paint. In fact, he is covered from head to toe in paint. They've even brought out stuff that wasn't in the cassette tape mode with all of the silver and all of the yellow there. Actually, no, that's gold, not yellow. I guess I was looking at it from the wrong angle, lol. Just looks-wise, this is probably one of the best Sound Blasters on the market. As a display piece, he looks fantastic. I don't have any issues with that. I don't have any issues with the plastic quality either. He is absurdly well built for a figure of this price. Usually for a price like this, you'd expect the build quality to be a bit shoddy, but no, this guy's built really well. The weapons work really well too. I could have kind of used some extra dots on the missiles there, but they've still got the red stripes there and there. And the red paint's actually done really well too. It's not wishy-washy in the slightest. They've actually put a few coats on, which is fantastic. As a starter piece from the company, this does absurdly well. My only gripe lies in the articulation, because he does have a few issues. Head works really well with a ball joint, and he even gets a reverse butterfly due to the transformation, and it doesn't look too unnatural either. And you've got ball jointed shoulders, so that works pretty well, but then we get to the elbows. There is no bicep swivel, it's just straight up and down. And yes, it's nice that he's got a wrist swivel and all that jazz, but it's really missing that. They should have just used a ball joint there, like they did with the Core Class figure that came out this year. But well, hindsight is 2020. It does seem like a bit of a misstep, but it kind of works. The next articulation is in the hips though, because these things are pretty loose. They've got hard plastic on hard plastic for the ball joint, so there's just not a lot of grip there. I feel they should have used a softer plastic for the thighs, and maybe also for these here, and then they could have justified that. But they wanted the red paint there, so I see why they didn't. And the final articulation issue is, yes, he does have a thigh swivel, but unless it's all the way facing forward, you get no rotation on the knee joint. So yeah, it doesn't go out at all, yeah. And if it's like that, it doesn't go out at all. You have to have it fully forward, and then you get that 90-degree knee. Also a bit of a misstep, but I do kind of get it due to the transformation. Aside from that, you just got some foot posability there, not much. Now, normally this would piss me off to high heaven. All these articulation issues on a figure of this size, I mean, come on, it's not that small. Like, let's put this into perspective and take some sizes quickly. Like, he's actually 7 centimeters wide and 11.2 centimeters tall, which is actually the size of some modern deluxes these days. And sure, we can bring him next to a standard Legion figure and nothing looks odd there. But then we bring him next to a standard Core Class figure, and what the f***? That is way bigger. Actually, that's probably not fair. He's standing a bit back, but even when you do bring him a bit forward, seriously, that is pretty huge. Of course, doing the other size comparisons, this does seem a little bit frustrating on paper. He's not that small, and he's lacking key points of articulation. That does seem a bit frustrating. However, here's the thing. This costs $20 and this costs $30. That is absurdly well priced for this thing. Now, granted, on the aftermarket, he is a bit more expensive. I've seen him go for 50, I've seen him go for 70, which I think is way too much. But he's not on the market anymore, so people can charge whatever they want, I suppose. But back then, he cost $10 more than a standard Legends figure, and considering the way he looks, with all the mechanical detail, all the paint, all the accessories, I think it's crazy that he turned out this good to begin with. A lot of the other Hot Soldiers figures did not turn out as good as this guy. I mean, you just take a look at Bumblebee and oh my god. But Soundblaster has done amazingly for his budget. Maybe they underpriced him, maybe they were selling him at a loss so that people would get interested in this new kind of Legends Plus scale. We'll never know for sure, but if you're a Soundblaster or a Soundwave fan and you just kind of want one that looks good on the shelf, not necessarily one to pose, but just a sort of novelty piece to have or something to go along with your Legends Plus collection, then I could easily recommend this. He does a great job for what he is. It's clear they've had to make sacrifices for the budget, because this is a budget piece. This is probably closer to Hasbro's idea of Legends than any other third-party company has attempted. It's cheap, it's cheerful, it's simplified, but it's fun. And that does come with some downsides. There is no elbow joints whatsoever. The transformation is also much simpler, and the cassette mode is less than ideal in some areas, especially the pelvis area. That's something they could have done much better. But you have to remember, this was $30. For a $30 third-party Legends figure, there's not a lot you could ask for. It is built very well, perhaps better than most third-party Legends figures. This is some dense plastic. I can squeeze this and nothing's gonna happen. Yes, I could ask for slightly tighter hips, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And at this size, it's not that terrible. And at the end of the day, it's fun. And that is third-party Legends in a nutshell. It has to be fun. The accuracy and all that other jazz can come later. If you don't get the fun factor down, you've essentially failed. And at least these guys knew the fundamentals, and that is why this figure caught on so well. But of course, like all things, this release could be improved upon. Add a waist swivel, add some biceps, you know, it could be pretty good. But don't wish for that kind of shit on a monkey's paw, because you never know what you're gonna get. I think tomorrow's review kind of shows why that's a bad idea.